Hey there.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm pretty good.
Thanks for being
Hi.
patient with me today.
Oh yeah, no, you're fine. I just hope you're patient with me.
Oh, I got all kinds of patience. We'll see. We'll see.
Yes, that's good. I just want to say I love the Monkees too. I love the Pisces Aquarius album. I love all the albums really. But I'm very happy that you finally you and Rhino and everybody involved were able to finally release the Pisces Aquarius Super Deluxe.
Yeah, it's a relief for me because it's my favorite of their albums. I also like their other albums, as everybody who knows me could
Mhm.
tell. I've listened to them in depth, but it was a multi-year process getting to the point where we could release it, and then people would ask me about it. It didn't matter what was going on in my life. People would ask me, when is this coming out? And unfortunately, I have a lot less discretion in these things than people might imagine. People are like, "Oh, you've been doing this for years. They must love what you do, and they're probably, just waiting on you." I'm like, it's kind of. I wouldn't say that they don't love what I do. They're kind of oblivious. They're more indifferent to the things I do, and
Mhm.
so it just was one of these weird things. And then I've been in the middle of doing a book on the Kinks, which is going to be coming out in February now. So I'm just wrapping
Great.
that up this weekend actually, and it's a day by day book like the one I did on the Monkees, and so I was in the middle of that, and they're like, "Oh, you got we need this we need this now for financial reasons. We need to do this right now. This Pisces set." I'm like, okay, but I'm doing other things. Oh well, what would it take to get you to do this like in the next 4 weeks? So it came together really well, and because it was my favorite, it was a real joy to be immersed in 1967 Monkees yet again.
Mhm. So basically, Rhino, they wanted you to make it this year. This
Oh
like
yeah,
seasonal
yeah. It had been
release.
talked about, but there had been sort
Mhm.
of like people. I think Rhino's assumption and other people's assumption is like I just sort of do this as a hobby, and I would have been working on this all along and have a dream list that I've been working on in the background. But the reality is that like just like you, I've got all kinds of bills to pay and things. So I'm doing
You don't
other
even want to know.
other non-dream job things. So yeah, so I was doing all that stuff, and and also my attitude towards compiling any of these things is more or less starting from now, from the best place, and also looking at everything. Just because I had reissued the record a couple of times before, I didn't feel like, well, I'm so great at it. Whatever I did before is perfect, and we'll just add on 2 discs to that. I was
Mhm.
like, whatever I did before might have some merit, but I've learned a lot, and I learned a lot about the Monkees subsequent, and we have some, are there other tapes? Are there other things? So that was the attitude going in, was like, let's approach this fresh. And also, I'm one of the audience. I'm not. I think that's kind of also where people are suspicious of me in record companies or even in the Monkees. They would say to me, "You're just a fan. Come on, like you don't really know. You don't have good taste. I mean, you like this stuff." And I was like, "Yeah, I really like this stuff. It's great, and I know the people who like it too, and I want to make something for them." So that's always my attitude going in, is like, what could I do that would make me flip out when I saw this, and make the other fans flip out too, have some really interesting stuff. Because I collect records. I'm buying stuff every week, and there's always that sort of, oh, I already have this, oh ho hum, and also like you a lot of things are kind of lazy. Like they figure, well, we'll just throw whatever on from previous releases and add a poster to it. And
Mhm.
I'm always like, how come there's other stuff you could put on there? Why don't you try? So that's what all the super deluxes are about, is me looking at it again and really thinking like, hey, I want this on my shelf for me too, as well as the people who I'm part of the audience.
Mhm. Now that you mention it, a poster of this would be so nice. With the
Yeah,
covers, just like the Let It Be poster.
they did. They actually did do one in the '60s, which I don't have in my collection. So the guy who did that cover, his name was Bernard Yezin, and
Oh, of the Pisces cover, yeah.
yeah, he painted that, and then I mean he did the first 3 album covers. He did Monkees, More of the Monkees, and Headquarters. He shot the cover of Headquarters and the other 2 photos. So he had gotten to know them, and when he did that, and so it's a beautiful thing. But he spun that artwork off, and he did a poster that they used to sell, like I guess they call them novelty posters or the head shop posters, like the black light poster sort of thing. But he did a big one of Pisces, which is the same sort of artwork, but sort of slightly differently constructed and kind of in the not the portrait mode, not the landscape mode, the portrait mode. So that's nice. Rhino did some merchandise recently based around that art too. It's a shame, Bernard Da is deceased, like many of the people who worked on this stuff at this point. But he had kind of a bit of a tragic life as far as, I mean, he was brilliant, but he had addiction issues and other things. And there was a point where I was talking to him. I was really hoping that Rhino would make a deal with him for doing more stuff like what you're talking about. And it just, for the same exact reasons, it was a low priority. And then he passed. And so that moment passed too.
It's unfortunate. It would have been nice for him to see like the fruit of that whole thing,
I agree completely.
So let me just start with the single that came with this. Was this an exclusive alternate mix of the 2 songs, Love Is Only Sleeping and Going Down, or were these
that
you already came across?
So both mixes on the vinyl 7-inch that comes with the box set are exclusive, meaning they've never been issued anywhere else, and they're not on the box set either. So that being said, as a collector, full disclosure, they're fairly similar to some of the other alternate mixes. But what we came into contact with here was the previous 3 Monkees albums, Monkees, More of the Monkees, Headquarters. When you make a record in the studio, you first put it on a multi-track, so you have the bass and the drums separate from the vocals and the guitars, and then you mix it. And in the 60s, they made mono mixes and they made stereo mixes. And then for the Monkees TV show, they made special mixes for that. And there's quite a few of those on this box. But the mix reels for the Monkees sessions, really prior to Pisces Aquarius, there's not a lot in the library anymore. They've been missing probably since the 1980s. So it's not like they got tossed out recently. I mean, these have been gone. Bill Inglot and myself, who's the person I started on the reissues with, we searched for this stuff he started in the 80s and I started at the very end of the 80s, looking for things, calling up people, going to different places where tapes were. And we have recovered quite a few things over the last 30, 40 years. However, there wasn't a lot of that. But with this album, there started to be all these mix reels. So we had multiple mixes of certain songs. So people were like, well, why is there more of this than there is of that? It's really of what we had in the vault. And so with this was an opportunity to put 2 things out that wouldn't have gotten on the box otherwise, and 2 exclusive things, and get, there's people who are cataloging all the mixes that have been out on all the CDs and all the records. And so for
Craig
those
and
people,
Derek.
so they helped me quite a bit with this, and so I took their advice on some things, and then I made the final decision as to doing this, because the other idea would be to have made the sort of fantasy single of Daydream Believer and Love Is Only Sleeping, which was the original, or Love Is Only Sleeping and Daydream Believer, which was the original configuration. But this seemed like, because I knew it was going to be the last thing I probably did, I just decided get the most stuff out to the public possible. And so that's what that was about.
Great. Yeah, and there's a lot of really good alternate mixes. I definitely love that there is a lot more alternate mixes of Star Collector. The first alternate mix on well, I mean, it's one, like, the first time we heard, or that I heard, an alternate mix of that particular song was the 94 or 95 release of the CD of Pisces Aquarius.
Right.
And that's like the first time we heard like all these other synth parts on it. and it just sounds like this like 4-alarm fire version of the song. It's like really explosive. And on here, there's lots more of that. There's like maybe 5 different more, alternate mixes apart from the one that doesn't have any synth on it.
Right.
So like in total, like how many of those did you have to go through? Is that it for all of the alternates that are available to you?
Well, there might be 1 or 2 others left over, but they might be quite similar to what's been out or
Okay.
what is out on the set. I mean, the thing with that song in particular was that the final multi-track for that, they started it on 4-track, and they got a new format in the middle of making the record. They got 8-track, so it got 4 more tracks to overdub and do different things with. And so they put the Moog synthesizer on the 8-track version of that master. However, that's now missing, along with a number of other songs on the album, the final things. And so these mixes were made in 1967 from that multi-track that's no longer in our library, and it never was in our library. So that's all the unique stuff is there. So I couldn't even create anything new. I think 2007, I created a new mix of it from the tape that was prior to them adding the 4-track that we have. So so there was a lot of thought put into getting as much out to the public as possible on this, and that was the thing. It's been mostly a lot of really positive stuff. I have seen people like, well, why isn't there this or why isn't there that? And the reality is because we don't have it. I mean, it's not like artistically I'm making a decision. No, we'll wait. People think, oh, he's saved all this stuff for these later things to make us buy it again. Like, well, I get paid a flat fee to do all of these projects, and I always have. So I don't make any more money if they sell any more copies. It's only my own pride in it, and wanting them to be of lasting value that makes me go to these extreme lengths. And also, I don't have any other setting. I just do, all my stuff is always like this. So anyway, I'm not saving the stuff for anything else. And that, every time I do something, I look at it again, like, is there anything else we can do? What can we do different? I'm a collector. I mean, some of the records I have, there's nothing different about them. They're just different label variation or a different picture sleeve, and I get happy having those things. I mean, so it's, but I think there's people who feel like there's some marketing calculation. I mean, they need to know, honestly, Rhino were very not into even putting out this record in general. Certainly not to the extent that I want to do it. They were more interested in the vinyl version, which is also pretty cool.
The hi-fi one, yeah.
Yeah, because that's cut from the first stage tape, which hadn't been used for any other vinyl pressing. And so I supervised that session with Kevin Gray, as I had done with the other Run Out Groove versions of the record. But yeah, I mean, people think that, Rhino does not really care much about the Monkees. They have the Eagles, they've got Frank Sinatra, they've got Led Zeppelin. They have all these people who really are keeping the lights on there. So when I come in, they're like, oh boy, this guy's not going to.
The monkey guy's back.
He's not bringing us the news that's going to help us save our jobs. He's going to try and talk us into spending money on something that we don't care about. And it's like, well, that's my job, because I do care about it, and I think they're important. And I think that in the long run, this is good for everybody. It's good for the fans, and it's good for them. So,
Aren't they impressed with the pre-order numbers? I mean, because, as soon as this was available, I pre-ordered it, so.
Sure. I mean,
great price, too.
I don't know. I think that they're just sort of bemused by it, because they knew that so many would sell. But, again, it's like, the Monkees are part of the furniture, and so am I. It's something they don't need to jump through hoops with. Whereas a lot of the other big, they've got Madonna, they have a really. I mean, as much as we're Monkees fans, we're like, they're the most important thing. It's like there's these other artists that like just dwarf them sales wise, and those are the people who they're chasing after. Like we must make them happy and stuff like that. I know they sell a lot of records, these other artists, but Monkees fans are so devoted to them, and I owe so much to the Monkees fans because, you know, they're the ones who supported all of my projects, and I'm really incredibly grateful. So, you know,
Hmm.
um, and people come and go from record companies. I used to work at the Rhino label, a
Hmm.
couple different times. So the people I'm talking to, now may be different people a year from now or whatever. It all changes. And I feel for people trying to, I got laid off from my job about 15 years ago. And that actually changed things for me and for the Monkees because I've been approached by a manager who wanted to put the Monkees back on tour. And this was about 2009 going to 2010. And so when I lost my job, he was like, "Come on, these guys. Can you talk them into touring again?" So we started talking about it, and eventually that was the 2011 tour with Davey. And then
Okay.
subsequent to that, I talking to Michael, and he came back in 2012, and then we, for the next 10 years, we did all this touring stuff, which was really fantastic, a totally different thing for me. And if Rhino had never gotten rid of me, I don't, he might not have done all that. But the Monkees wanted to do it too, and I had the time to do it. So that's the way things go. But you can't really depend on the music business to take care of you. You
Hmm.
gotta take care of yourself.
Yeah, but anyway, I still think the angels and the universe had a lot to do with it too.
Yeah, I think God loves the Monkees for sure. There's got to be a reason why he keeps
God
putting
does love the monkeys. Yeah, that's fabulous. And to be honest, like there's just still so much to go through, and like it's like these recordings tell you like it's like there's stories waiting to be told about a lot of this. I guess my I don't know, maybe this is kind of a why question, unless it's just going to be, it's because the tapes are still missing. There weren't any alternate takes of Peter Percival.
No.
There wasn't. That you don't know if like maybe it was just a one take thing and he nailed it right away, or no, that
Well,
he probably spent more time on it.
I believe he did it more than once because that's I think when I talked to Chip Douglas, he did it more than once. And I
Hmm.
know he did the other spoken word thing, Alvin, like not too long after that, he did multiple
Hmm.
takes of that. He had the multi-track of that with the different takes. But
Yeah.
yeah, we're missing that. That's among the missing pieces for
Hmm.
the production of this album.
Oh, but I just realized something. Ryu Shiyu. Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
there's like, what are there, like 4 or 5 versions of Ryu Shiyu now?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
fabulous. It's
yeah,
fascinating, and they're all very different sounding.
yeah. So I mean, that was interesting because they tried it a number of times, and then there was the time that I've talked about a little bit,
Hmm.
and that was my biggest victory in this entire set, which was looking at the fact that so Mickey had come in to try and add a vocal to a version that they had done, but he was really blitzed, and he says
Hmm.
so on the tape, and he keeps. I mean, it's a big running joke on this tape, but they had a tone for him to sing to, and they had a click
Hmm.
for him to sing in meter. So there's this going through the whole thing, and then there's a tone,
An
and it's
early
on his.
click track.
Yeah, but it's on his track, which wouldn't
Hmm.
be an issue normally. However, in storage, the tape being wound for so long, stuck in its place, that bled through onto the track that had just the Monkees on it. So even though I had the Monkees on a multi-track with a separate thing, there was bleed of all of that had printed itself on it. So in the computer program Isotope, I was able to take out these tones. There was a number of tones
That's
by
great.
hand, and then by you can. There's obviously there's declicking programs where you could just set it automatic, but it takes away other stuff. So what I did was by hand, I cut out every. It was only a 90-second thing, but I spent a couple hours click, click, like each one taking it all in my room here, not running up a big bill. And but there's something really gratifying because it's like under there are my friends, and
Hmm.
then my other friends are gonna get to hear something we haven't ever heard, and I never heard. So that's the exciting, part of it.
Hmm. Well, I mean, it's incredible to hear everything so different too. Especially because they did it with Davey on the show, and then there's a session where Davey's not there. But do you
Right.
happen to know why he's not there? Was he on vacation or something, or
No,
because
I
they
mean, I
did it
get
without
into
him?
the note. Yeah, I get into the notes a little bit. He had been disillusioned a little bit, especially in '67, with the management of the Monkees and his deal with the Monkees. He felt he was getting a raw deal, and they did renegotiate their deal. I mean, they weren't getting the best deal for sure, the four of them, but he felt that the other guys were on a different deal than him because he had started his career with Columbia Pictures back in '64. You know,
Hmm.
at least a year and a half before the Monkees pilot was sold, and he was contracted to that. And then, they all signed on in late '65. So he thought because the other guys signed a deal later on that they were making more money. In actuality, since I've had access to all the documents, he was making more money, but it wasn't a lot more money. I mean, it was, you know, in the hundreds of dollars per week, maybe. And being the most famous of the four of them, the most visible and recognizable, he had these other opportunities. So he started his own record label, and he started his own boutique called Zilch, and these other sidelines. But unfortunately, the people he partnered with in business were unscrupulous, and
Oh
so
no.
yeah, so he lost quite a bit on all of that in trying to kind of like make up for what he felt was the disparity in what he was getting from the show, and so that was
Hmm.
unfortunate. And then there was a certain point where he just was like kind of checked out on what they were doing, unless like he was excited about doing Hard to Believe because that was him doing his music, and what they were doing, Chip was constantly trying to get them together, the four of them, on to be on things, and he was just less excited about that. And Chip would complain that Michael Nesmith was, but Michael actually sings like, I guess, five of the songs on this album. So the reason why he wasn't at that session was, they were all leading these busy lives, and if he could get out of it, I mean, if any of them could get out of it, uh, other than Peter, who just loved being in the studio and he did
Hmm.
lots of solo things that you hear on this, Man Without a Dream and other things where he lived and breathed music. So the fact that they had all of this studio time that was at their disposal, although they were paying for it, it was coming out of their royalties. They didn't know that, or probably weren't explained that. But he was
Hmm.
like, I can go and play, and I can have my friends come in, and that's kind of where the Monkees' music drifted after this album in November.
I mean, that is interesting too. That "A Man Without a Dream," Jerry Goff and Carole King song, was Peter like doing that because he liked the song? Was that because I often wondered about the songs from the outside, like the songs that were pre-written. Were those like chosen by the Monkees, or were those chosen by the label
Well, I
in
think it
most
would have
cases?
been in this era Lester Sill, who had started with the Monkees from the outset of the project in '65, who had taken over from Don Kirshner as sort of the coordinator, and a more benign coordinator. He certainly knew all of them, got along with all of them, and I interviewed him and met him, and he was a really wonderful guy with a lot of history. So he would sort of push forward songs for them because he also worked for the
Hmm.
publishing company. And Chip would take on these songs and say we could arrange them, and then he was very clever because he would try and engage the individual Monkees. Like he knew, like, well, Peter loves arranging things, so if I get him interested in this song, even though it's not one that they wrote, he
There you go.
might really get engaged enough, and that might bring everybody in. So it was, that, and that's what you had to do because after headquarters, going into this record, the idea that they were going to get together and just be them on the records. I mean, the Monkees, even to the point where I knew them, it was always, well, once something's successful, we can't repeat that. We go on to the next idea. We don't repeat. We're the It's like that's not creative. We go. That's why they're interesting. We got to go
Hmm.
and do something else now. Why would we do something that was like that? And so that's where they were coming from. They were not they were a lot less excited to come to the studio and make another record. They had other things they could do. All four of them.
I would imagine that somebody had to sit them down and say, "But you understand, you have to make more records, though, right?" I mean, it's
Well,
sort
the
of
thing
part of
is,
the deal, you know.
yeah, there was really was nobody to do that. So
Hmm.
Lester Sill would have been the closest person to that, and he wouldn't have been able to talk to all four of them unless they were on the set. And if they were on the set, if they were shooting a scene, the minute they got off shooting a scene, they'd go into their dressing room and they'd not want to be dealing with business. So the recordings were often done after a filming date, or between filming dates. And in this case, they were on a nationwide tour through the summer, and they took the tapes along and they overdubbed in places. So that kind of, they were in the mode of playing, and they weren't doing the TV show, so that kind of kept their interest going in this album. And
Hmm.
but yeah, there was really nobody, and to get a consensus of the four monkeys uh, after headquarters was completely. It didn't seem like it ever happened again.
I mean, it probably also like spilled over into the show too, because like if you'll notice, their energy on the show very different in season 2 than in season 1. It's like
Right,
not
right.
even the same show in most cases.
Yeah, you have the absence of Michael on several episodes, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's they're so accustomed to it after after the first 32 episodes or whatever in the second season. It's like they're just sort of, it's a lot of fun to watch them because they're so loose and they're so comfortable with one another, but they're also, it's like you can tell why they were completely bored by doing the show at the end of it, and then decide, oh,
Mm-hmm.
if we're going to do another season, we got to do something else. They didn't think like, this is great. We have such great chemistry. People love watching us. This is really clicking. They were like, no, what if I did an episode and you guys weren't in it, and then they could just, that's where they kind of went mentally with
Mm-hmm.
everything, was just like, well, we're the Monkees. We'll always be the Monkees, but we're four different people. So why don't we just
Mm-hmm.
be the four different people under the banner of the Monkees, and and even when they came back together in reunions, it was always difficult. I mean, Davey, when I was trying to talk him into coming on tour again in 2009, 2010, he's like, but I'd have to give up my comedy, because at that point his solo shows had developed into this thing where he would come out and he would do like 10 minutes of stand up prior to performing any songs. And he really liked that. And he thought, like, I've
Like the
really got some
cabaret show.
I've got some great timing, and I mean, nothing to take away from it. So what I said to him was like, think of this as summer stock in the Monkees. You're going to do a Monkees tour for 2 months, and it's like if you were going back into Oliver or something else, and you're just doing a season of that. You don't have to give up your comedy. You're just doing the Monkees show for this thing, and then you're back onto your thing. And sadly, we did that tour, and he did go back to his solo stuff for a short time, and then he passed on really really fast after that.
um, don't call on me.
Hmm.
Okay, so they cut the song, and of course, we all know it's an older song of Mike's from the early '60s and everything. And he did demos of it and all that. Um, so, like, who had the idea to do the club stuff with with the noises of like the audience and stuff? Was that Bob Rafelson, or as I know he's the one playing the piano, and he wanted to have everybody
Yeah,
say specific things.
I'm trying to think back because I do discuss it a bit in my notes in the
Hmm.
blogs. But I think in my recollection, just off the top of my head, when I talked to Michael about it, he's like, "Well, of course we would do something like that, because you needed to deflect the seriousness, or what seemed to be like this dramatic content of Don't Call on Me. You
Hmm.
needed to lighten the mood of it, do this wraparound, because it just sort of deflects away from, like, well, this is like a kind of a heavy departure for the Monkees." I think it's sort of similar in a way to what I know George Harrison was quite upset about with John and Paul
Within you,
adding
without you.
on Then You Without You, the laughter and all this other stuff after he's making this heavy philosophical statement. I don't think Nez felt that he was making a heavy statement, but he did understand, like, this is sort of different, because But but if Davey had done a ballad, it would have just been there, you know. But
Hmm.
um, they all had different facets that they wanted to do. I mean, it's a great number, and it sounds really really great. Some of the that was one where we did have uh, the multi tracks, and we had the party part too. So on
Hmm.
the that was tough to cut down because there's like 20 minutes of it, and I don't know. I think I cut it down to like basically. So here's what I did was I found out how much length was left on that disc, and I chopped it down so just enough so it would fit. I could fit as much of it as I could with all the other
Hmm.
selections I had, because that's how much I want to get. Because it is pretty hilarious, and they're all they're there other than Peter, just having a good time.
There's all kinds of crazy things that they said too. I like the one with I'll
Yeah,
have a glass of the with a Black Russian in it or something. That was.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I guess you got to hear it to
Yeah,
know
yeah, no,
the
no. I
whole
mean,
the whole.
there were many times doing this project where I was cracking up too, because,
Hmm.
it's a weird thing for me because I see them as the guys on the I started watching them when I was like 5 years old, and see them as the guys on the TV, and I hear them on these records, and then they're those people, and then they're the people later in life that I knew for a long time. And they would be joking just constantly. Anytime we'd be in like a car together, it would be just like, and I would just be sitting there listening, and that's
Hmm.
kind of was their shtick when they got together, is they would trying to like out joke one another, and the atmosphere was always really interesting. Um, so to hear that kind of brought back a lot of those memories for me, and I laughed lots and lots of times, because it's like I can just imagine I could see them in my life. I could see them saying some of this stuff. It's just
Hmm.
great. So.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I love it. And apparently there were different edits, and like I know like in some of the mixes of the song you got like almost 10 seconds of silence before the applause comes in.
Right,
Goes on forever. I was like, okay, what happened there?
right,
No,
right.
yeah, so it was just it was better that they brought it in immediately, and so that it wasn't like disengaging or anything like that. I love. I guess maybe I just kind of want to get this out of the way. I've always loved the Moog on Daily Nightly and on Star Collector, and I love how Peter Tork has always said in interviews that like when Mickey played the Moog, he made something really special out of it and made something very creative, and it
Right.
was like very compelling, whereas like when Paul Beaver played it on Star Collector, he played it like an organ. He didn't really do anything magnificent with it, but he's kind of wrong about that, but even so,
Yeah, I
I
mean
kind of get his point though.
yeah, Paul Beaver, I mean, it's if it was
Mhm.
just like an organ, I mean, he plays some pretty crazy sort of sloppy stuff actually. It's,
Mhm.
when you hear the Moog shortly thereafter on people's records like the Association or the Beatles, all these people who did use it, weeks, months later, it's very mannered. It's like wop, 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 whatever. But Star Collector is fairly unhinged as far as where
Mhm.
it goes and I guess I feel Paul Beaver got into the spirit of what they were doing as far as
Yeah.
it being just a jam at the end. But Mickey's thing is sort of just is otherworldly
Mhm.
on Daily Nightly, and it's again a shame that we don't have the Maltese for that. And I know the mono and stereo, they fade up different bits and pieces, much like Star Collector. So
Mhm.
Chip Douglas did a fantastic job on this album, great production, and in all of these variations, you hear his attention to detail and trying to creatively get to the point where there's so many great alternates on the set. However, none are greater than what he put out on the album. I think that the album
Mhm.
is just a stone classic and really, really perfect.
Mhm. Yeah, the best possible version is there, with like just kind of bringing things in and out right at at the right levels and the right amount of sound, definitely. Um, like especially because the mono is just a little bit limited on that, and
Oh, for sure.
um,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I also love the multi track of or the alternate mixes of Star Collector that gives you like what all of that other stuff was going on. You know, the funny thing is though, Peter Tork is probably doing the most frightening thing with the organ at the end there. He's going like, what did he
Yeah,
do? That's like is that a Hammond B3 or something that
yeah,
he's
it's something
playing?
like that. Yeah,
Hmm.
and I mean, he was pretty crazy musician. I was looking at something on my phone the other day, which was from when we were doing Good Times, and he's sitting next to Adam Schlesinger, and he was just messing around playing some keyboards, but he would just do some really wild stuff. But I will say he also would be like the best prepared showing up for a tour. He would really have everything down. I mean, he's a great musician, and he's also, I mean, one of my favorite people to be around and travel with. I really, really
Hmm.
liked him so very, very much. I really loved him, and we did a solo tour thing once together. It was really a fun bonding experience. But
Hmm.
he does great stuff. He really clever stuff, and again, great, multi instrumentalist. I mean, because you hear him on keyboards and a lot of stuff here. You hear him on a lot of guitar stuff, and he comes up with a lot of interesting things.
Hmm. And of course, he did both keyboard parts on Rainy Scout Skid, another great track on another
Yeah,
record.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and oh yeah, Pleasant Valley Sunday. I'm obsessed with how that materialized also because they did this incredible thing with reverb at the end, and it kind of sounds like the song swallows itself. You know, it's like
Right.
incredible to hear it. The stereo mix definitely way more so than the mono mix. The mono mix, it feels like it goes off a little too soon. In stereo though, it's like over here and then it's over here and then you know it
Yeah.
always to me as a child sounded like somebody flushed them down the toilet. You know, that sort of had that effect for some reason, but it always blew my mind.
Yeah, it's a wild idea. It's a wild idea
Hmm.
to how to end a song like that. And when we were doing this box set this last March and looking, I was working with Amin Zaruki and helped me resync some bits and pieces. And I was like, hey, so you know a lot about stuff, and I know a lot about stuff. Well, let's try to like come up with some kind of, can we recreate this? Like, how do they do this? And he and I were both baffled. I mean, I came up with something, and we did do something, but it was just like, the multi-track, they just keep playing and playing and playing and playing, so which you hear on the box, which is nice. You get
Hmm.
to finally hear that, and but yeah, I don't think you could recreate that. A very,
It's not
not
easy to do live, I know that
yeah,
much.
but yeah, you need a lot of analog equipment,
Hmm.
and that's the thing with the mono and stereo, and that's where it really shows itself on that and the psychedelic tracks, that how different they are and people don't understand. It's like they made there's two different versions of that record. There's the mono and then
Hmm.
there's the stereo, and they are different.
Alternate vocal too.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
You know,
So
especially because I mean, the first thing you notice is he goes, "The Weekend Squire just came out to mow his lawn instead of just
right,
came out to mow his lawn."
right, yeah, that took a little bit of even for me, knowing that, just finding the exact placement, because at the time, they would have been at a mixing desk, they would have had the four tracks up, and they were basically muting, moving faders, and doing everything live, and I more or less would be doing something similar. I could program in some of my um, moves, which they couldn't do then. They didn't have flying faders then, which is something that came in later, which would automate, which you can automate things now. But even with automation and stuff like that, it took me quite a while to learn where everything was, to even get close to what the single version in mono was versus the stereo one vocally, because it's not intuitive. It's not like, oh well, the mono vocals on this track and the stereo ones on this track. It's like, nope, it's a mixture of the two, and it bounces between the two, and you basically have to line by line listen to it. So it's a lot of the remixing that I did on this box. Um, I never think like, well, man, I'm blowing away those original mixes. I'm like, no, I'm trying to get them to sound good so I don't feel bad about doing them. Like that I'm actually adding to it in a way where it's like you're getting a longer fade or you're getting to
Hmm.
hear this part of the thing that you wouldn't hear. That's my intent with the remix, is not like, hey, look at me, I'm the guy remixing the Monkees. It's more like, don't look at me, listen to the Monkees, listen to this crazy stuff that only I ever got to hear because it's buried in these tapes. So that's my intention with the remixes always, is
Hmm.
to take that attention and then also to try, like, I think what they did then was great. So I'm always like going back and listening to that constantly while I'm doing these new mixes, like referencing A being, going between the two, like, oh wow, well they've got a lot of reverb on that, or oh they've got that vocal's really, but that's when you hear a lot of people doing mixes now, they're like, no, 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 I'm doing new mix and it's going to be so much cooler because it's new. It's like, well, usually there was a reason why they got to where they got to with those things, because and people did those. I mean, even with limited technology of the time, some of that stuff sounds way better than what you can do now. So
Well, I don't know. Did they just have better facilities? Because I mean, it just feels like it was really natural for them to just simply go wet as opposed to going dry and in reverse, and then like especially like double tracking and
yeah,
versus just what single tracking a vocal. Those are like to me the biggest differences between mono and stereo on a lot of different things,
yeah.
and it's like we choose to go wet on something mono, whereas
Well,
no,
the reverb
sorry, go ahead.
is hard to recreate the wetness of the mixes because
Hmm.
RCA had its own chamber. And so a chamber is a room like kind of like what I'm in now, but it's painted with reflective paint, like paint that
Hmm.
will, like, so that it's reverberant. And then you have one speaker, and then you have a microphone in front of the speaker, and it's a closed room, and basically you send the the element, like say a vocal, back down into there, and it's it's like it's basically a speaker just playing Davy's vocals, say, and there's one microphone on it, and it's in this big room with nothing in it.
Hmm.
Like this room has carpets and other things in it, but then so you'd be hearing all this stuff would be bouncing, and you'd hear like all the room sound, and so then back up in the studio room, this is totally a removed room. They would basically pot up a part of that reverb sound over the dry, and then it would be the balance between those two things, and that's where they would find the reverb. They also had echo plates, which are like narrow pieces, like a narrow block of like plywood sort of thing, and then there's a literally a metal plate, and there's space between the two walls, and the plate reverbs, like reverberates like this. So, and then you're sending the signal of the sound into that, and you're hearing the metallic bounce of that. So there could be a mixture of those two things to make the sound. And as you say, sort of is natural because it's what they had on hand, but it's also what we've fallen in love with over all these years. It's the sound that we know, that we really like. Whereas you have infinite possibilities now, but you may not even have the same kind of possibility that with the limited things that they could do then. You may not even come up with anything as cool sounding because just it's very different, and it's all they had then. So they probably felt limited, but now it's like, wow, to have a big room just for reverb and then have a big echo plate, it's like there are places that have that, but it's not easy to come by these days.
I had no idea so much architecture was involved in studios. It's
Yeah, no,
incredible.
it's a crazy thing. I mean, that's when I got interested in all this when I was in, high school or whatever, start making recordings at home on a little cassette Porta Studio, and then like
Hmm.
listen to the 60s records like everybody else has, and like how do they do backwards reverb, and learning about that, and then I start to follow around Bill Inglot and go to his sessions. And I also went to see other producers' sessions There was a guy named Chad Blake who's a great, brilliant engineer, and he knew I was interested in recording, so he invited me down. I watched Los Lobos record some of Kiko, and then I started making my own recordings at studios and learning about how to do the stuff. I mean, that's like part of my fascination with all of this. And so when I come to do a Monkees thing, I'm bringing all of that up because I mean, I learned in the analog world I can still edit tape, I can cut tape and splice together stuff, and I have two analog machines in this room. I mean, all that stuff is in my background, and
Hmm.
that's why I love all of this era. I love going back to it because it's the place that I feel comfortable in. More so than the modern world. And so a trip back to 1967 was uh, a lot of work, but a really fun trip.
Did you have to get different mixing desks for that, for like remixing older material, or did you just have to like, do everything like digital?
I did things digitally because I've come
Hmm.
to I have an analog mixing desk, but I've come to a comfort zone where the last box I did in this series, Headquarters, I did a remix of the entire album,
Hmm.
and I finally felt that my actual capabilities of doing those things had finally met up with the timing of doing a project, and I kind of start to feel like, the stuff finally sounds pretty good to me. I'm feeling good about what I'm doing. Whereas in other times, I'm like, I wish I could do better. I want to do better. I'm constantly always trying to like learn more about how things were done then. And I interviewed a lot of engineers and producers and people who worked in studios then to just learn as much as I could. But I am the digital world now, and that allowed me to do stuff like the reissue thing,
Hmm.
and a few other bits and pieces that would have been like in the old days. We did sync up multi-tracks for things when I worked with Bill, and it would involve we would get two analog machines. See, so what would happen in the '60s is so they'd make a record, like they go into a studio, and the band would come in, so bass, guitar, and drums, right, without the vocalist usually, and so if it's the Monkees, okay, Davey on tambourine, Mike on guitar, Peter on bass, Mickey on drums. All right, so they're banging away. They do a tape across 4 tracks of a half-inch 4-track machine. They take that tape. Okay, we like that tape. It's you just may be the one. Okay, we're going to use that. They bounce it. They call it bouncing to another machine, to another 4-track machine, a second deck, and then they combine those elements on those 4 tracks to 2 tracks of this new machine, and then they've got 2 open blank tracks where Davey can sing, or Mike can sing, or Mickey can sing, or they can do backing vocals on 1 track and then do the lead vocal on another, and then have the 2 tracks. So they can have a stereo backing track and then the vocals at the center or tambourine over here, whatever. And then they may say, you know what, we're not finished. We need to bounce it to another machine because we still want to add percussion, or we still want to add these other elements to this. So this is before they had the 8-track. They would do this. Now,
Hmm.
each time they bounced, they lost a little bit of quality. So the idea would be you take the 2 tapes and you sync them up, and then you've unlocked the original 4 tracks, so you can spread around the instruments better,
Hmm.
and you don't have to hard pan everything. You got the vocals at the same generation, and then if there's another stage, you can use that stuff too. Now the issue is that because it's all analog, not all these tape machines, they're all on this, so it's all recorded at the same speed, say 15 IPS, inches per second, 15 inches per second. That's the standard. They're all running, but there's slight speed variations with the motors of all of these machines. It's like within a percent, and there's drift too because it's an analog thing. It's just like, the weight of this much tape on the reel versus a little here, that changes this. There's like these slight, you know, degrees of difference in the drift. So
Hmm.
we used to take 2 machines, and there's a thing called the VSO, the very speed oscillator, and we would adjust that, and we'd be adjusting it through while we tried to sync up these 2 things, and then we'd be taping it to another machine. Now, digitally, all we have to do is load in the files and then line them up, and that's where mean came in, because there's still this drift. So it's like knowing the music is really important, and sort of seeing how to line them up without distorting, not like crunchy distortion, but more like distorting, like say you get a photo and you're like, oh, I want to make that photo a little like crop it or wider, and then all of a sudden it's like out of distort. It's like weird. And your face is all wide or your face is all compressed. That happens with audio too. So
Hmm.
so in the digital realm, you can do this stuff carefully without messing it up, and that's where we finally got to on these last two boxes.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, I know. I'm glad that you told me about that because of the with the tapes being out of sync sometimes whenever, you'd have to do that bouncing thing. Because I don't know, I wasn't going to try to make this about an experience of mine, but I did used to record music, and
sure,
I
sure,
did work in a studio where the gentleman who was our, I guess, sort of semi-producer engineer guy, he had like an analog tape machine, and he had like DAT machine, and he needed some sort of machine between them to sync it up. I
right.
don't remember what it was called, but he had that, and I guess that was something that was probably created for that very situation that you were talking about. And because like he would like it would sync it up, and it would like one of those things would be like lagging along for a second, and like speed up, and then catch up with the other tape.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
fascinating to watch, you know.
yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, all this stuff
Yeah.
to me is exciting, and like I don't see that part as extra work. I feel like, oh, this is like my problem to solve. This is
Hmm.
exciting, the exciting part of it, because it's like I'm really interested in the engineering aspect of it, and then there's the social part of it as far as knowing what the intent was. I called Chip Douglas several times and was texting with him while I was working on this, even in 2025, like, and just asking various questions and just making like getting a reality check on some things. So I was grateful that he was around to do that, and I was grateful to
Hmm.
be in the place I am in my life where I've known him for a long time. I could talk to him, and it just so this is a nice set in that way, to be able to feel like I know that this is going to be loved by some people. So
Hmm.
let's put some love into it.
Definitely. This is something that's not extremely important, but I thought I'd tell you. It's something that I discovered, I guess, when I had the CD that came out in the '90s, the Pisces CD, the with the bonus tracks. I guess the first one that
Right.
ever had the bonus tracks. Special announcement. I guess that was the first appearance of that outtake.
Hmm.
And I always notice this about the recording itself. The very end of it, there's this thing called pre-echo, which I don't know if everybody knows exists, because it always
Yeah.
used. We'd hear it, and I thought maybe it was just in my head that I heard these things, and I thought like it's my imagination, and I know what the next part sounds like. But you can hear the beginning of "She Hangs Out" at the very end before it
Right.
fades out, and I'm like, oh my god, that's the beginning of "She Hangs Out." Do they run, they run, do they run, run, that part.
Yeah.
So is that because it's on the tape like that on the original
Yeah. Yeah. That's
master?
that's because the technical term which is not overly technical, might be called print through. That's because where it
Hmm.
was wrapped, basically the oxide particles have sort of impregnated that part there of the thing, because that part really comes in loud. That duty run a run. So that loud part got kind of mashed up, in the analog world onto that
Hmm.
there. So it's not that it happened in the studio where they were doing it. It's just it happened that they didn't fade it down, or they didn't like cut and paste in what you could do now, some room sound to just cover that up so that would go away.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's the story with that. And those of us who, like, I used to, when I was in school, you had a Walkman with the headphones and you listen to stuff. There'd always be, I'd always be hearing on my cassettes the print through of like the next song, like about to start up. You'd always hear the first little bit of it, because it's the same thing.
I mean, because you could hear it on Led Zeppelin records, and they never bothered to fix it. It's just there.
Right. And some
You know,
things,
like just before Robert Plant, I can't quit you. You know, whatever. I'm not gonna.
yeah. Also,
Too
some
much
things
energy.
we're getting into restoration of certain things. Like I feel like certain little things are part of they're part of the experience, part of the record. You don't want to like necessarily like sanitize all of that. Part of that is what was there on the original thing. So.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's just good to know. I wasn't insane, but of course, I noticed on further releases of the track, it's not there anymore. So I'm a little sad about that.
That's why you gotta keep all those. So.
Yeah, well, I do. I have a copy of it still, so I can always go back to it. What is the story with Ann Moses on Daydream Believer? Now, was she like a guest that day or something, and
Yeah,
she
yeah. So
happened
she
to
would
be
come
asked?
down.
Can you do hand claps and sing in the background on this
Yeah,
song?
yeah. Essentially that. And
Hmm.
interestingly enough, I mean, I'm a big Tiger Beat fan, and I have a collection
Hmm.
of all of them from that era. That specifically the Ann Moses era. And when I became friends with her about 12, 13 years ago, and we were talking, and so she told me the whole story about it. It was very credible. I believed it not just because she's my friend, but because she had all of the details. And that's when you're putting together the liner notes and all of the things, people, there's tons of stuff out there. But there is a amount of, you got to sort of detective work where you have to like sort of look at, here are things that are anecdotes, here are things that are facts, here are things that are rumors. You get into that with all these things, but she told me all about that particular session, and that was the deal. And she did so many extraordinary things in that era. She's a really,
Hmm.
really phenomenal person.
And Harry Nilsson. Of course, on the session on the box set, they there was a third version of the story of rock and roll, which is of
Right.
course Harry's song, and he plays really good piano on that track. But he also apparently is on Love Is Only Sleeping, or at least on a take of it or something. And um, is that something that ended up being like on the final release, or was that just like we don't really know what he did?
We
Kind
don't
of.
know what he did, and here's the detective work on that. So I'm a huge
Hmm.
Nilsson fan, and I've worked on the Sony 17 CD box set of all of his albums. So I'm a big
Right.
advocate on behalf of Nilsson. And however, here are the building block things that we don't know. So Love Is Only Sleeping. We don't have the multi-track. We don't have the session reel to know in the session reel I could hear, if I had it, I would be able to hear Chip Douglas, and he'd be talking to people, and he'd be saying, "Hey Peter, would you do more of this?" Or "Hey Harry, do this or that." And I don't have any of that to know. And then so there's more just what we have, which is the finished mono and stereo recordings. And then I think we have some unfinished multi tracks of that as well. Now, the issue is that where the Nilsson credit comes in is that there would be paperwork filed for each of these sessions with the AFM, American Federation of Musicians. And in
Hmm.
1990, I went to them and I said, I'm working on a book on the Monkees, and I have permission from their record label, Rhino, to look at the union documents because we would like to put proper credits on their records saying who played on their records. I didn't get into the whole thing like these records have never had those credits. They didn't. So what the union had was literally hundreds of contracts, which I was given access to, and I copied the contracts. And then even when I was doing I did a revised version of my book in 2020. It's a 700-page book on the Monkees, day by day book, which is available from my company, Beatland Books, if anybody needs it. Anyway, so I I I got more paperwork from the union during that time, during the COVID era. I paid research for things that I might be missing. What was common at the time was that it was a little like handout for people if they were hanging out to put you on the session sheet. You'd get like between 50 and $120 to be just listed on this sheet. And because the Monkees had sort of an unlimited recording budget, which they were paying for, it was coming out of the royalties of their hit records. All these extra people got their names on these sheets, and they got like a little bit of extra money for like that, And I wouldn't begrudge Harry Nilsson, $100. Although $100 in 1967 was a lot of money by
Mm-hmm.
comparison to today. I mean, but if I, it's just like it was sort of like everybody coming and getting, come by at dinner time because everybody gets to order whatever they want, and you're not going to pay for it, type of thing, but a bit more. So there was a number of people, including Bill Martin, who was another friend of theirs, who did do some work on some of the things, like he plays the bell on Daydream Believer, the alarm clock bell. He's on these session sheets. They were very tight with Chip Douglas. They were hanging out with
Mm-hmm.
Chip. And whether or not they did anything vocally, I mean, I would imagine maybe Carrie could have added some vocals, Bill Martin, but it's never been defined. So in some cases, the Monkees are on tour in a totally different place. They're not at the session. The only people at the session are Chip Douglas, Bill Martin, and Harry Nilsson for Love Is Only Sleeping. So what's going on? We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They're playing back the tape. Maybe they tried, maybe they said, hey, Harry, why don't you try to like add a harmony to this or try to double this or whatever. And then, oh yeah, that's not working. And it's not on the record, but he's on a union sheet. So in some cases, we have placed them in like unknown or other. So if they are there,
Mm-hmm.
we're covered. And if they aren't there, we're sort of covered. But that's sort of the situation. It's certainly not defined. And on the union sheets, they seldom ever say Harry Nilsson backing vocals, Harry Nilsson organ, Harry Nilsson piano. They don't say that. It just says, Nilsson, comma, Harry, and then his address and his social security number, and $56.80, and from this time to this time
Oh,
at
God.
RCA Studios, in a list with like a few other people. So that's what the evidence is, and you really have to marry that with the other uh, oral evidence of like what's on the
Mm-hmm.
actual. What do we hear on the? Do we hear him? No, but
I mean, is it plausible that he's the one making that weird like percussion noise that's being echoed on the beginning and the end of the song a little bit,
I don't
perhaps?
know. I mean, I don't know if it's any more plausible than anybody else. I mean, I
Yeah.
still don't quite understand how they did that either. You know, I couldn't
Yeah, I
figure
know. I was hoping you were going to
it
shed light on it. I'm like, what is that weird? Especially because on these alternate mixes, it's even like crunchier sounding.
Oh, I know. Well, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed because
I
it's
mean,
like you
it
can really
sounds
hear
like
it.
they
Sounds
had a
like
jawbone and they hit it and they just made this incredible, like,
yeah, and
fast reverb of
it's
it.
got delay. It's got delay on it and reverb,
Hmm.
and yeah. I mean, so I was like, oh well, and it's loud on the TV show too, on those TV show
Yeah.
mixes. So I was like, yeah, we'll just throw it. Like people can really hear it. So wish I knew. Wish I knew. And
Well, I
it was
mean, it's just another great, psychedelic moment on the record. I mean, among
yeah.
others, it's not just the Moog, it's that, and it's the, the crazy organ, and it's the crazy reverb. This is like a cavalcade of sounds. That's like it's probably the most experimental that the Monkees ever got on a record.
Yeah, although some of their later records are really weird. It's to me, it's the most
Well, that.
experimental, the most successfully experimental. You know,
Hmm.
whereas later on they were just experimenting and it's like kind of a little bit less focused and just it doesn't always land for me on some of the later records.
Hmm.
But again, some of the later records have some astonishing over the top things. I mean, like, have you ever heard, if you were ever to hear sort of the multi-track for Shorty Blackwell, I mean, it's
Hmm.
really incredible. And, Zorn Zam, and, I mean, there's stuff on Birds, Bees, and the Monkees that's exciting in that
Hmm.
same sense. However, that album moves on to a different place because you have a much heavier Davy Jones thing with a lot more ballads, which you really on this album he's just on Hard to Believe.
Yeah.
You're not, you get him on lead on Star Collector, and you get him on Cuddly Toy, but you're getting a lot less of him. But Birds, Bees, the Monkees, it way goes into the other direction. It's a heavy Davy thing, and then the Nesmith songs I always felt on that album on Birds, Bees are disappointing based on he had other really great songs. I mean, he has Nine Times
Mm-hmm.
Blue, Carlisle Wheeling, and like, geez, I mean, just those two songs on a record would be great. But to me, like, I don't want to hear Righting Wrongs if it means I'm not going to get to hear those songs. Or Magnolia Sims is interesting. Tapping
Mm-hmm.
the Tundra is interesting, but it's like he had some great songs in that period that you're not hearing on that album. So they start making their own choices, and sometimes their choices were
Mm-hmm.
odd.
Well, I mean, I do have to say I love Magnolia Sims. It's another one
Yeah.
of those things as a child I heard and I was like, this sounds like mommy and daddy's favorite music. This is on a
Yeah.
Monkees record.
I
I mean,
I love it exists. I don't wish
yeah.
for it not to be like I'm not one of those people like it shouldn't even be there. It's more like
Mm-hmm.
it's there, but if you were, this or that, if you're playing
Yeah.
that game, it's like, and you have, you have Nine Times Blue and Carlisle Wheeling, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, man, those are incredible songs. And he had other songs he was working on in that period that have never been on anything. That there's just demos of. They're publishing demos that aren't even
Mm-hmm.
with the Monkees on them. Just him on acoustic guitar that are just great. So
I know the acoustic demos for Tapioca Tundra and Magnolia Sims, great recordings too.
yeah.
Oh my god, and they even used it on Better Call Saul.
Yeah. Yeah, those were in the publishing archive. So
Mm-hmm.
technically, they're done during the Monkees thing, obviously, but they were just done for copyright, really, so that you know prior to them being recorded properly for an album.
Here's a question for you, and it really kind of is about taste here. Mono or stereo for the album in general, for
Hmm.
the Pisces album?
I'm a big advocate for mono in general, but I would go back to something you said earlier in this discussion, which was that it's very limited and compressed on this album. And so, therefore, I
Mm-hmm.
find the stereo to be more enjoyable to listen to in general, and especially on this particular edition because we have the
Mm-hmm.
original master. And with the mono, we did our best with what we had, and we really, was painstaking to assemble what we got together for it. And I think it sounds good,
Mm-hmm.
but for a lot of other records, like the mono, is always feels more centered, more solid. And with this, I feel like the stereo is really a more enjoyable listen. Uh, but I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't. I mean, I always feel like two versions of my favorite album, great. I want them both.
Mm-hmm.
Five versions, I'll take them. I mean, but I think in this experience is like the stereo. I would. I mean, I'm trying to think of if there's some mono track on the album that I would say, man, it just. I do like the mono Pleasant Valley Sunday. I really do feel like
Okay.
that's an odd sounding record in general. It's a weird production. It's kind of a
Mm-hmm.
mishmash of qualities. Like the vocals are really like this at sometimes, and then they're like this, and then, like because there's a lot of punch-ins. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about? Basically, like
Yeah.
it's not just one continuous performance from Mickey. It's like he did a performance and then Chip is like, hey, redo this line. Redo that line. That's where you get the out to mow his lawn. It's like that's punched in on a track that has other stuff on it. That's why it's hard to, because they would be looking for available space. It's like, well, we're going
Mm-hmm.
to add these harmonies and all this stuff. It's like, oh, there's a bit of blank real estate here, and he could punch that in, and we could fade that up for that one
Mm-hmm.
section, and then it's out, and then it's on to something else. So
Yeah. I mean, I'll say this though for the mono, though I feel like it wins in certain pockets of the record. There's more. She hangs out at the end a little bit. It has like a longer fade on it. There's a longer, well, not a longer, but there's like a juicier sort of version of Star Collector because a little bit of that weird moog at the end sneaks in before
right,
it's over.
right, yeah, yeah.
I love that part too, you know. So it's like it wins and it loses, mostly in just little bit dribs and drabs on the record. But I would say maybe in general, I prefer the stereo too.
Yeah, yeah.
Among the two of them, do you want to see what I have here? Just because, you know, I don't know. I mean, I am probably going to have this on YouTube also. Among my records, I thought maybe you should at least see what I have, because I just wanted you to know you know, I do have these things and I'm not lying to you. This is the mono original for the Coal Gems pressing of the mono. I don't have the turquoise one yet. I still want to get that at some point. This is something interesting. Venezuelan copy of the Birds, the Bees, and the
Monkees. Yeah.
You know, that's, I mean, the only thing different about it is the cover. Unfortunately, it's a fold down mono. It's not the true mono. Yeah. I do have a copy of that though, but it's got a very regular cover on it. And this is the Japanese pressing of Birds, Bees from the 80s. Yeah, the Arista, where they stuck Valerie at the beginning. Yeah. And I don't know if you like this or you've ever seen this, although I'm sure you probably have, the Monkees Refocus.
Right. Yes. Very familiar.
Which is basically, yeah, it's the Monkees' greatest hits, but it's on Bell Records.
Right. So the Refocus precedes the greatest hits. Essentially, they just repackaged Refocus as greatest hits. Yeah. It's an odd title and stuff like that, but I guess they're just trying to figure out, does anybody want to hear the Monkees at this point in 1971, 72? So
on the Partridge Family label.
Yeah. Well, the successors in title from Columbia Pictures, Bell Records. Although Bell had existed, you know, when Coal Gems was originally around, but Columbia Pictures had a lot of other labels. They also had a label called SGC, Screen Gems Columbia is what it stood for. It was distributed by Atlantic and ADCO. And so I think at a certain point, they're like, we're folding all these labels and we're just going to have Bell, you know, doing all this stuff. But yeah, Coal Gems was a weird label, first developed for the Monkees, and then they had other artists, Lewis and Clark Expedition, PK Limited, and you know, Living Daylights, all sorts of interesting people, Fountain of Youth. So yeah.
By the way, I don't know if this is of interest to you, but Michael Framer, the guy that does Tracking Angle and he does all the vinyl stuff, you know, reviews the stuff and everything. He did a review of the Pisces Hi-Fi record, and he actually credited it as a Colpix record.
Yeah,
he put that on the review. I was like, Colpix?
Yeah.
Is this 1964?
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, I know. Well, I think, you know, the audiophile world is an interesting one. You know, and certainly Kevin Gray, who cut the Pisces record, you know, I supervised it. I go to the sessions. He and I are quite friendly, and we've worked together for, you know, a long time now. We've done quite a lot of records, but we have a good working vibe. But the process that I go in with him is that I bring like the original pressing. I brought my original Coal Gem stereo pressing, and we A-B'd it with the tape, and we got all of the levels to be accurate to the original vinyl, and made sure that tape was perfect for what we were doing and all that. But with a lot of the audiophile people, it's they only see certain aspects of things, and that's where they go. So you know, they may think that I'm not hearing it right because I don't have the right cables, you know. But I do have an expensive turntable and all this stuff. I'm interested in. I watch a lot of audiophile videos as well. I'm interested in that world, but I'll feel some of it. A lot of what they talk about at times is counterintuitive or not even plausible given the way records are made. Like they're like, well, reverb is terrible, compression is terrible, and this. It's like all that's on those records that you like. It's all in the studio. They're cranking up on all those mixes. It's just you don't like it in the mastering thing. And a lot of people look at a mastered piece, a CD or whatever, and they're just looking at the waveform. And it's like, well, this waveform has like a clipping here, and that means that the entire record must be terrible because it's, you know, lobbed off here. It's like, No, it just means on that track, it's like that, when you play it, can you hear it? Is it distorting?
Hmm.
Is it, it's like there's people who are concerned about the dynamic range of things, the DR level. They'll say like, before I buy this, I got to see what the DR level is on this. It may be my favorite music, but I'm not going to listen to it if it doesn't have a DR level of this or that. So, it's hard for me to take that stuff seriously because I know, like, if somebody said, okay, well, here's a really scratched up acetate of this Monkees song, and this has a different mix on it, and it's only on this acetate, and the only way you can hear it is through all these clicks and pops. And um, do you still want to hear it? Yes, I want to hear it.
The
But for
Gold
them,
Star
it's like,
demo.
unless it's going to be a perfect experience,
Hmm.
and unless I see the names of the people that I like having worked on this, I don't want to hear it. And how is it even, they don't even know, I mean, what goes on in manufacturing, once
Hmm.
once you send a you make a lacquer when you cut a record, it gets put into a box, it gets FedExed off, and hopefully it gets into what they call the bath within 24 to 48 hours, hopefully even less. I used to drive my lacquers over to Rainbow so they would be put in the bath. Hopefully they made it past the reception desk, and they put them in this thing so they're because the lacquer is in this state where it can disintegrate a little bit, and you're going to lose fidelity. So you want to get it plated and get the stamper made as soon as possible. But because you're not cutting the lacquers at the place where they do that, it's all going to be shipped, and there's always going to be a time lapse between the two things. If it's being pressed in Europe, it's going to be a
Hmm.
longer time. I mean, so there's all these aspects to it that people will look at these things on the surface level and they'll say, "Oh, no, no," and they don't even know all the other stuff that happens of how they make the sausages or whatever it is. It's
Hmm.
so so I'm interested in that. But yeah, I think for also the hi-fi of this, there were some people came out originally negatively, like, why would Rhino do this? Like, they do all this good stuff. Like, the Monkees are so unworthy of this kind of treatment. And a lot of people, when I started my job and doing the reissues, told me that too. It's like, why would you be involved with such crappy music? Like, there's all this good music that needs to be preserved, and you're doing this stuff. I mean, this stuff should just not even exist. I don't like it, so you shouldn't like it. And I've
They're
I've
so
been I
bubblegum.
know, yeah. Well, so people like, you wouldn't believe what this person said about the Monkees. I'm like, I bet I could. And you're nothing's going to shock me at this point, and they said that the monkeys went down to the river and they drowned kittens, and then they hate
Oh
they
my
hate
God, I haven't heard that story yet. That's terrible.
it's always something like, this person really hates them. And then I was at a dinner with my wife's boss was having this big dinner, and I was sitting next to some people, and this woman started going, didn't know who I was, and that's okay because I'm not famous, but started going off on the Monkees, and I didn't say very much. I said, "Oh, well, actually, they did do a lot of their own playing on the records, really." And then later on, the the person who mentioned this to the person giving the party, that, oh, I talked to him about what, oh, did you know he works with the Monkees, and so the person came up and like sort of apologized. I don't really care what you think of the Monkees. I mean, they made millions of people happy. They made some people unhappy that they just existed. There's nothing
Hmm.
I can do about that. My job is the people who really love them. I do stuff for them. I'm not here to proselytize or try and flip people and make them Monkees fans. You want to be a Monkees fan? The
Hmm.
music's been here since 1965 through 1970. Just enjoy it. There's lots to love, you know.
Well, I'm very happy you have acquired all of this and you were able to to
No one
work
else
on the
was doing it.
music.
No one else.
I mean, yeah, there were, like, but I mean, seriously, like, it came down to, what you were doing, and, that you and the other people in the the team that worked on bringing all the stuff back. I mean, it's just so wonderful. You know, I have to tell you, there was a day when I was in college in the 1980s where I was alone and I was bored and I was probably depressed. And I guess they had like this local paper. It was Queens College, actually. So I don't know if that matters, but they had like a paper. And I guess they had a music reviewer. And wouldn't you know, the person that wrote the review was reviewing the Rhino reissues that had come out. I noticed that like at that time they were coming out with like the later records first, you know, the Monkees Present and Instant Replay and Changes, I guess, or the Head soundtrack. And I was like, oh my God, the Monkees! I can't believe this. This is great. You know, are they going to do everything else too? You know, I looked forward to it because I wanted to get the records again. I mean, I didn't know that back at that time you could buy used albums, but you know, I missed those records because the only records I had were all scratched up. All scratched up copies of Cull Gems records that my sister owned previously without the covers, you know. So this is all I had, you know, this is all I had. And at the time, there was a time too where it wasn't on television. They took it off of television. It wasn't even in syndication anymore. I was like, oh my God, you know, like, am I ever going to have this experience again? I was trying to like continue it for myself, even when people like, don't you know they're gone now or something? I don't know. My parents hated the Monkees, so I had to live with that every day.
Yeah, my parents didn't love the Monkees, but you know, that, you know, I think the reason why they were doing those later records was because they were really unavailable. I mean, now you could go on Discogs and buy Monkees Present, Instant Replay, and Head, and all those original pressings, you know, all the live one day. But then it was hard to track them down. No eBay, no, you know, even Goldmine, it would be a rarity. Also, because people didn't know the value of those records then too. They does anybody care about these people? You know, that sort of, there was that attitude. But the tide has turned, you know, and the Monkees catalog is in good shape. Most of all of the things that were in the vault have come out on all these different sets. You know, their history, I think, is well preserved now. And, you know, the guys came back and they did all those tours and they presented a lot of the music that they never played originally on any of the tours. And, you know, so it's a good story. And I think it's been a really nice thing for me as a fan and also for all the other fans. I think it's in a good place. And, you know, we always wish for more. You know, it's like, I would love to do more things, and people have written to me like, when are you going to do this? I'm like, I don't know. And I don't know if we'll ever do those things, but I'm happy with what we've done. And I really enjoyed, you know, going through some of the more esoteric aspects of this with you.
Do you, oh, thanks. I appreciate that. Do you ever hope that at some point, or I mean, I guess the real good question would be, do you ever like look for the stuff that's lost, if there's ever a chance that it's going to, like, some like lost sessions or some lost, you know, extra tapes are going to turn up?
For sure. For sure. I'm always on the lookout, and I've bought back tapes and put them back in the library. I bought back acetates off of eBay, put them back in the library, and most of the stuff I've bought, almost all of it's on these super deluxe sets. So if I buy something, it's not just for my collection or just for me to have. It's like, oh, I know the people who own the rights to this, and they don't say, oh, well, here's $600 back for buying that acetate. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess we could put this out. So it's always put on as bonus tracks or whatever. So you know, that's what I do. But I'm a collector. I mean, I'm out all the time looking for 45s and other things. And so if ever I hear of anything like that, I get excited and usually try and track it out. Sometimes it's a wild goose chase. You know, sometimes there are people who say they have things, or then they're like, well, I don't know if I want to sell it, maybe someday. And then, you know, what we're seeing now is, unfortunately, a lot of people passing on, and their collections are turning over, and then stuff is being discovered out of those. So, but my interest is still there, and you know, the hope is that some other, you know, it would be great to hear those other missing multi-tracks or other sets and reels.
I mean, they found missing footage from Metropolis, 80 years
Exactly.
after the movie came out. So whenever I hear people going, no, they'll probably never turn up. I'm like, you never know, because that
Yeah,
turned up,
I never stopped looking for stuff. I never stopped researching things. So I mean, because it's my, it's my lifeblood. It's what keeps, why you want to wake up every day is like maybe today's the
Mhm.
day when some crazy thing is going to turn up. Who knew about that?
I know. I just hope you're going to be around for another 50 years in case it takes that long for like missing sessions to turn up.
I better start working out.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I hear you. Definitely. I mean, especially me. I'm I'd like to be around for a while and see like our world turn around and get better. At some point.
Yes. Yeah.
So anyway, listen, Andrew, thank you so much for doing this. It was
Oh, it's my
such a
pleasure.
pleasure.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna have this up soon, and I'll let you I'll let you know if there were any issues with the recording. I hope not.
I sure hope
Fingers
not.
crossed.
I don't think we could recreate this, but no, I had a great time
No.
talking to you, Chris, and I really enjoyed doing this. And thank you so much for
Mhm.
inviting me on and
Yeah.
being so accommodating with me too. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Andrew.
All right, have a great weekend. Take
You
care. Bye.
too. Bye
Stay
bye.
safe.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.
Okay.
The Gen X News.